if I keep seeding my brand values and what my brand is about and be consistent about it. So it's not something that's very difficult to build, but it's not a short-term ROI activity. You need to really invest in it, and you need to be really patient when it comes to brand building. So I think it's a vital organ.
We took everyone on a writer's workshop. So everyone in our communications team, we went to Chicago, spent 3 days with the brand, really understanding the tone and the voice. I think too many people focus maybe on the visual elements, and they're very important.
Welcome to the Healthtech Marketing Show. I'm your host, Adam Chirinos. Thank you for listening. If this is the first episode you're listening to, please subscribe on whatever podcast application you use. And you can also find a lot of our content on YouTube. Just search for the Healthtech Marketing Show. Also, a big thank you to Healthcare Now Radio, our sponsor, and we're so grateful to the work that you do. Healthcare Now Radio is a 24/7 online radio station dedicated to all things healthcare. They also have a podcast syndication network that we are very lucky to be on because it's done marvels for us. It's increased our reach by about 5x in the last 6 months. So we're really grateful to Healthcare Now Radio. Okay, today's episode is about the B word, brand. And it's one of those words that can clear a room in a B2B company faster than almost anything else. The moment you say it, someone in the C-suite starts thinking, well, that's the soft stuff. What I need is pipeline. And honestly, I get it. I've run a healthcare technology company. And so where sales cycles are really long and the buyers are very skeptical, it can feel like brand is a luxury that you might put off spending money on till much later. But here's the thing. Brand is what makes everything else work harder. It's the difference between marketing dollars that compound over time and marketing dollars that just evaporate. So today's episode is entirely dedicated to brand. And I think it's one of the most practical, useful conversations we've had on the show in a while. I've got two guests, and you're going to hear from them both separately. And they're both marketers who live and breathe this. First guest is Arushi Awasthi from Innovaccer. This is a company that's been building a healthcare AI orchestration platform since 2014, and one that I've been watching from a distance for a while. So I was really interested to hear what Arushi had to say. And Arushi has spent 15 years in this role, and she gives us a really grounded perspective on what brand actually is and why it matters and what it's built from. Then we go deep on how to revitalize a brand with Rebecca Whaley, who is the SVP of marketing at Nordic. They are the well-known healthcare IT consulting firm. Rebecca has 26 years industry experience, and she walked into the Nordic role about 6 months ago and immediately do something that most marketers would skip, which is she commissioned a rigorous third-party brand study before touching a single thing. And what she found and what she did about it is a genuine masterclass in how to revitalize your brand the right way. So 2 conversations, 1 topic. Let's get into it.
So I'm Arushi, and I've been doing brand and communications for almost 15 years now. I've been with Innovaccer close to 3.5 years. And I'm very passionate about brand building. It's something that I don't see a lot of people paying a lot of interest to these days. So I feel that it's a very important part, almost like a backbone or spine of an organization. So what our vision is and what we truly believe is we can make healthcare truly autonomous. By autonomous, I mean giving the administrative tasks to AI to orchestrate that so that the doctors and the physicians and people really get back to caring for people. So they don't waste that time in documentation or tasks that can be handled by machines. But of course, the human still remains in the picture because you still need clinical decisions. You still need human intervention. So we're not telling that humans go out of the picture completely, but AI takes care of a large part of the roles that you do what you've learned to do best to care for people. So in fact, I think my CEO Abhinav did release a manifesto at JPM on autonomous healthcare. And today I see at why everybody's talking about autonomous healthcare. So we feel kind of the ones that put the idea, seeded the idea,
missionaries.
and brand is ideally the spine of an organization.
Yeah.
In B2C, it's more visible because, you create it, it's a direct sell, but in B2B, it's a little more difficult. But at the same time, if I don't have a brand, then I'm going to keep putting in dollars on my marketing budget to get the ROI. So what brand does is creates that recall, creates that, you would remember in Innovaccer if I keep seeding my brand values and what my brand is about and be consistent about it. So it's not something that's very difficult to build, but it's not a short-term ROI activity. You need to really invest in it, and you need to be really patient when it comes to brand building. So I think it's a vital organ.
And so deconstruct brand. So when you sort of think about what are the pillars of the Innovaccer brand?
I think transparency, trust. For any company, I think the vision and mission come as a part of the brand, but do you really believe in the vision, right? Do you believe in your customers? How do you take your stories out? I think storytelling is the key part of the brand narrative. And if you miss on that, then you've lost the brand. The last thing that most people miss when they talk about brand is the brand love, which again, we believe that whatever we do is for our customers, and that love of the brand, of what we deliver to them, shows to them in the outcomes. So they tend to believe in us. So it goes to trust, transparency, brand love. And those are the pillars that you map your brand technically against. And if you see in the longer run in the marketing pieces, that's where your retention, attrition come from, and how long are your customers a part of you? Because today what happens is there are multiple different brands or logos, I would say, that are upcoming in the market. So how do you differentiate from your competition? That's where your brand is, right? And why should your customer not go to another new thing that's coming in and they're all hyping about what they're delivering, and they will suddenly switch because they're also cheaper?
So what is the articulate? What is, Innovaccer's positioning? Because you mentioned autonomous, making healthcare autonomous through AI. And that's something which has sort of become kind of like a category association, right? So it's very hard to differentiate on that. How do you differentiate Innovaccer?
If I say how do I differentiate the company, I think what we do today, everybody else is offering various point solutions in the market. What we have is a 360-degree AI orchestration platform. So you don't need 10 different vendors, but you need one Innovaccer in your system. So I can omit 13 vendors, do a job in the same healthcare space, but you just need one Innovaccer, which has all those 13 tools.
So the value proposition is essentially sort of a consolidation play, which is just like, exactly. Which is you see you've got 10 different licenses and 10 different agreements that you've got to have, 10 different business associates, all that stuff. Simplify it down to one.
Yes.
The total cost of ownership is less.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So that's the sort of, I kind of think about lots of different ways of thinking about brand, but one is like left brain, right brain. So left brain being hyper rational.
Yeah.
That's the hyper rational. What's maybe the more emotional and sort of abstract side, the more right brain side of it?
So the right and B2B right brain is a little difficult because you have to be really creative. In healthcare, you're supposed to be super, super sure of what you're doing because everything becomes a compliance issue, so to say. But I think what I feel is the clarity of intent or the intellectual clarity. That's the right brain when it comes to healthcare branding, right? Because you can get really lost in the sea of different ideas. The left brain is thinking because it's thinking money, it's thinking revenue, it's thinking how do you make money by doing this? But your right brain is thinking, can I stay in the same position even 10 years down the line and still say the same thing and still win? Because that's how you use your creative juices to not move from what your center position is. So like I said, the creative part in B2B becomes very difficult because I can't run an ad campaign saying, buy my soap, you know? So it's more of intellectual clarity.
So you mentioned media and media relations. Where does that fit into your overall plan?
I mean, it's very important to get your right story out. So the idea of media relations for me and for the company is how do you get the right narrative out about what's really happening, what are we doing, what are our customers doing. So a large part of my media story and media narrative is showing the success of my customers. So that's our primary focus. And of course, there are other things, the partnerships that we do, how are they making a difference in people's lives. But I think a key pillar is to show how successful my customers are and how are they making the best use of technology in their day-to-day lives and, making their lives a lot easier.
So that's Arushi's take. And I think it's a useful foundation for everything that's going to follow. Brand isn't a campaign. You know that. It's not the logo. It's not a refresh of the colors. It's the spine of the organization from a marketing standpoint. And as Arushi put it, it's built from trust, transparency, and storytelling. And in B2B, it rewards patience in a way that almost no other marketing investment does. So what does it actually look like to work on your brand in a deliberate and structured way, especially when you're coming into an organization and inheriting whatever brand equity or brand baggage already exists? That's exactly what Rebecca Whaley has been doing since joining Nordic. And what I love about her approach is that she doesn't just start with answers, she starts with real data.
I work at Nordic, so we're a
Yep.
healthcare IT consulting firm,
Yep.
offering lots of different services to healthcare organizations,
Mhm.
and come in as their senior vice president of marketing. I started with Nordic in August, and it has been an amazing ride so far. So whenever I first joined Nordic, the first thing I typically do is a brand study. I really want to understand where the brand exists today in the market. And so in a brand study, we kind of look at three major things. We look at awareness, look at familiarity, and I look at favorability. And that really gives me a guide onto what I need to do with the brand.
Mm.
So within Nordic, we have tremendous awareness.
Just before we get into I'm curious about the granular stuff, which is, did you hire a research company to do
We did.
this? Yeah.
Always third party. And then you want to make sure that your survey numbers are equivalent to, your market. You tell them what your target market is.
Yeah.
So we wanted to focus on healthcare executives.
So quantitative and qualitative?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we did it by regions as well, because Nordic is a global company. So we wanted to look at
really?
how that awareness appears in the
Yeah.
US. And then it varied when we went to Europe and then Canada.
I'm going to ask a question alone. A lot of listeners want to know. It's like, how many people were, ballpark?
300.
300. That's amazing. That's impressive. Yeah. I don't come across too many companies that do studies of that level, because that's an investment. I mean, it's an investment in money, but it's also an investment in time.
It is.
So how long did it take for it to run?
So we ran the study for approximately 3 months. So the study itself was probably, a couple of weeks. And then they actually meet with these individuals. They do aided, unaided awareness. So it's pretty in-depth, the questions that we're asking of these individuals. So it takes a little bit of time to gather that. And then to culminate all the data and then, provide it back to us in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Probably took about 3 months, start to finish.
So what did you find?
So what we found was that pretty much overall, Nordic at this point was a nascent brand. So meaning that we had awareness, but we had a tremendous lack of familiarity in what we did. So people were used to seeing our logo. They didn't really understand what is the value that Nordic provides its customers.
How long has Nordic been around?
15 years.
Wow. Yeah. I'd say, you're not alone. I've heard of plenty of companies that have been around longer that's still like, I know the name, but I know that, but I don't know what they do. So,
Right.
yeah.
And more of the familiarity was they knew where we started. And so we hadn't done a really good job at where we've advanced our service offerings. So we kind of our roots are an implementation of Epic.
Yeah.
And so if they knew of us, that's where they knew us. So we've added so many different services since then.
Yeah. And, just in terms of the misalignment, how much of the, round numbers, percentage of the business is back what the legacy of the brand's about versus where the brand's going, where the business is going?
Yeah. So I would say it was a breakdown of around 30% didn't know the true value that we brought.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So not catastrophic. It's not like,
No.
90%, but it's just, interesting. Okay. So you've done the study. Now what? What happens next?
Yeah. So you realize obviously where you kind of fall and then where you need to focus your areas. And so I typically look at brand as perception, visibility, and influence.
Perception, visibility, and influence. Okay. Break that down a little bit for us.
So perception is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So it would be your name, Adam. So if they see your name on an email or, the logo of your organization, so of Healthtech.
Right.
And then what is the feeling? What is the first thing that comes to mind? Credibility, all of those words that we're really looking for. So I want to understand, what is the perception of our brand? If that perception is in a positive direction and we have awareness, you don't really want to change the brand too much because we already have that awareness. And if you change your logo and who you are, you're going to start back at zero. So we wanted to leverage that. But then we also wanted to figure out, okay, if we have the right perception with our brand, how are we leveraging our content and our thought leadership? So, our thought leadership, I felt like, was a little too salesy at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Not really credible. And so really engaging, and people wanted to lean in. And I think we were shouting too loud rather than showing up where we needed to. So really being meaningful and purposeful in where we meet.
So back to the perception, visibility, and what was the third one?
Influence.
Influence. So perception was misaligned with where you're at.
Correct.
What you were using to support thought leadership was not where you wanted it to be. And certainly in terms of sort of too salesy, not thought leadership enough. Come back to that bit later. Visibility and influence. Yeah, where did you stand there?
Visibility, when we come to shows like Vive, how are we showing up? Are we doing the large booth space? Are we, doing more sponsorships? So, if we have that brand recognition, we want to make it visible. But when we're trying to drive that influence, we need to say more than just our brand. We need opportunities where we can actually sit and talk. So you're looking for more speaking opportunities. Great, they know your brand, but do they know what you do? And we already discussed familiarity. So we want it to be more visible and showcasing just the services that we offer, talking a lot more about our success stories that our clients have had, really trying to build on that credibility. And I think only then can you start to influence the market. So if your people think highly of you, high perception, you're around, people feel like you're credible, and then now they'll tend to follow you. And so then you can kind of change your kind of path with your brand.
Is it perception plus visibility equals influence, or they
they build on each other.
They build on each other.
You can't influence if you have poor perception. So that's why I always start with perception and then move through visibility and influence.
I think I love that framework. I've not heard that. It's very helpful. Okay, so you've done some analysis. You've come to a conclusion about the problem. What does the solution look like? Did you change the positioning? Did you change the narrative? What then happened?
I would say the biggest change has been in our messaging. So being consistent with our voice and our tone doesn't mean saying the same words, but if you kind of put in front of, our leadership team when they're going out and speaking and when they're creating their own thought leadership, kind of having a similar core dictionary of words that you like to use that kind of represent the brand. So we're using things like, let's help guide. We're going to let you help, or going to help you care brilliantly. So words like brilliant, light, we're going to illuminate a path. So saying those types of things, people become familiar with the tone.
Yeah.
And so we spend a lot of time developing a tone, being more consistent with our tone and our market messages and our campaigns.
And how do you get these hardened executives comfortable with using some words that I wouldn't say brilliant. That's not a word I'd use. How do you get them comfortable with that?
Honestly, they have just kind of fallen into place. I think they recognize the same problem.
Yeah.
And so once I kind of brought them the problem and the potential solution, but you're right. I mean, there's a few that whenever, one of our tags is singularly healthcare, infinitely insightful. That doesn't really roll off the tongue with everyone. I mean, I have to kind of stop and think about it. But that's also a good thing.
Is it? Yeah.
It's a good thing because they say it slower. And they say it with meaning and purpose. And so if your messaging is kind of all a bunch of sound bites kind of glued together, when you say something like infinitely insightful, you have to stop and think.
Yeah, infinitely insightful. Now, just to play devil's advocate, if you're saying that about yourself, it's quite a bold statement.
It is.
Yeah. And so is everybody comfortable with that?
I think they are. I think what we're trying to, influence in the market there is that we know where healthcare is going and we're creating the services to help you get there, that it's a partnership that we're going to guide. So, together we become infinitely insightful. It's not that Nordic standing alone is the most brilliant one in the room, but that we work with our clients based on the knowledge they have, based on our knowledge, and then we create service offerings that support their need.
And how have customers responded to that?
So our soft launch is actually here at Vive. So that's been fun. So lots of great feedback so far, I think. But as we start to roll this out into market, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think the sort of the sense of infinitely insightful, because we're part of a broader community, our job is to articulate that insight together. that is compelling. I think you're saying it just sort of, if you're chest beating,
Hmm.
it's a bit, that's a,
And we're trying to establish a
risky.
differentiator, right? So
Yeah.
the singularly healthcare part is really, if you look across the competitors in our space,
Mhm.
they dabble in lots of different lines of business. So
Yep.
just a portion of that may be healthcare. So the first part, singularly healthcare, defining our differentiator in the market,
Yeah.
and that we're forward looking,
Right.
infinitely
Yeah.
insightful.
Nice to say. That's nice and simple. Okay. So first part of the execution is getting the words right and getting the executives
Mhm.
comfortable with the words. What are the other parts of
So
rolling this out?
we took everyone on a writer's workshop. So everyone in our communications team, we went to Chicago, spent 3 days with the brand, really understanding the tone and the voice. Not as I think too many people focus maybe on the visual elements, and they're very important. But that
Mhm.
wasn't what was necessarily broken. We needed to elevate it. So we did add some splashes of color. We're still green. Nordic will always be
Yeah.
green. But what we really felt that where we wanted to focus was, again, on that content and that messaging piece. So being able to remove them from their day to day and make everybody okay with being uncomfortable for a
Who's the
minute.
them? Well,
Our communications team we took, as
right.
well as our segment marketing team who develop all of our campaigns.
And so this is fascinating. Tell us about this workshop. Who ran it? What was it like? What were you writing about?
So we have a fabulous partner in Chicago we kind of worked with to help us, like,
Mm.
this is where we want to go. This is who we see Nordic as.
Yep.
Helped us kind of start down this path. And then when we sat there for a few days, we looked at some of our previous communications, whether it was a social media post or whatever it may have been, a campaign, a headline and an ad.
Yeah.
And we asked each other to rewrite them and then share them. So you had to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's hard to write on the spot.
Right.
No AI involved,
I
right?
was gonna
That was
ask.
harder
Yeah.
because everybody, it's way easier. And I love AI. And I think there's absolutely a place for
Mhm.
AI. But we got comfortable with one another. We started
Yeah.
to get more comfortable with the brand and correcting each other. Like, oh, what if you use this word here? And I think what we realized in that group was there's power in the collective thinking of content
Yeah.
rather than you're responsible for Marcom. Adam, you write all of our Marcom.
Yeah.
So I think before we were very siloed in our approach of content and thought leadership development. And this allowed us to kind of, hey, collectively, we came up with something that was so much better than we would have as an individual.
That's brilliant. But I've never heard of a company do that. The only thing I've heard that's vaguely close to that is, God, this is about 15 years ago. I worked for this digital agency in New York, and the CEO was a really interesting guy. He was quite an introverted guy, but he had some very provocative ideas. And he wanted the executive team to understand the value of telling stories. Not so much so that we gave better presentations. That was part of it, but that wasn't what it was about. Mostly it was so that as an agency, we got better at telling stories. So we did a moth workshop. Do you know the moth?
Mm-hmm.
Right? We did a moth workshop, which was like fascinating. It was like how a story is created, how to get up and tell a story. It was it stuck with me for a long time. So it was a good team building exercise. So this is great. So this is I'm getting how you're building the foundations. You're getting the messaging right, getting the executives into the messaging, getting the marketing team comfortable working together, embracing the new language, forming that new language together. Now what's next?
So now we're working on launching all of our campaigns.
Yep.
So we have the messaging, and campaigns always start with a problem in mind.
Yep.
People are twice as likely to run away from a bad thing than towards a good thing.
Yeah.
So you want to look at what are the challenges that are facing healthcare. We came up with 5 big challenges, and then we started to craft all of our campaigns around those 5 challenges. So they're going to start to roll out. Again, we would love to start off the year running some meaningful campaigns, but in my mind, taking that step back and getting it right was better than just launching a bunch of noise. So we did take a little bit of a step back just from our advertising dollars spent while we were doing this hard work. And so now we're getting ready to launch all of those campaigns in market, and then we focus on lead gen and the rest of the amazing things that come out of the marketing part.
That's really, really good. Okay, got it. And then you said it's just a soft launch here at Vive.
Correct.
And are you doing a hard launch at HIMSS, or
We are.
Oh, yeah, okay, good.
So brand new website launched on Saturday. So it was really a just in time.
Yeah.
And so, building on that for our HIMSS, we have a booth at HIMSS. So it'll be more of the visual identity piece that we would launch there.
I look forward to seeing it.
I welcome you to our booth.
I will be there. So what are some of the lessons that you've learned from this process? I mean, it sounds like this is not your first rodeo doing this. You sound like you've done this before. But what are some of the lessons from this time doing it?
I love that question because I've seen it both ways, right? I went into an organization that had very poor favorability, just pretty much we had high awareness, very poor favorability. So what that tells me is people know not to buy from you, right? A lot of people know your brand, but they know that it's not good. So the first thing I always do is look at the organization. What is the hard work the business needs to do? Because it's very easy. A lot of organizations just want to slap a new brand on it. Hey, let's just rebrand, right? We have really bad, perception in the market. That doesn't fix the true problem. All you end up doing is tarnishing a new name in a year from now, right? Because you haven't done the hard work.
Right.
So I always go in and think, okay, let's look at the organization. Let's look at the favorability piece. Why are you not favorable? Has the organization committed to doing the hard work to bring up the reputation of the brand? And then you can rebrand. And I've done that before. With Nordic, again, that really wasn't our challenge, wasn't really within our brand or the favorability. It was more in the familiarity piece. So that's more thought leadership and content focused. So again, start with that brand study, really understand the gaps and then where you need to focus and then build on that perception, visibility, and influence.
Right. I had somebody else on the show talking about going through a similar exercise, and he talked about the personal risk that you take because you are particularly in a new organization,
right,
where you may not have the relationships and that equity in place to people to say, all right, Rebecca, we trust you. We know you've been at site. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, I definitely smirked because that was one of my fears coming in is, are they willing to accept potentially some bad news, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they may, I didn't know what their perception of our brand was in market, right? There's kind of the reality that shows up on paper when you do the survey versus what the people sitting in our executive leadership team, how do they feel about the brand? And sometimes they're not aligned. So if I have to go in and tell them that we have this brand challenge, I think they've all leaned in tremendously. But you're right, it is a risk. Fortunately for me, I didn't have any missteps in that direction, but I have a fabulous team that has been around for a really long time and understood and was able to provide me with the historical backgrounds and maybe how to position that better.
So how to navigate, make sure, that's a landmine, walk around that landmine, but you'll get to the same outcome. You just won't blow up in the process.
Exactly.
Yeah, got it. Okay. You mentioned thought leadership. So tell me where you're taking it from where to where.
So right now, we kind of talked about the salesy piece, right? You want to make sure that what you're building as far as thought leadership content can be salesy. That's okay. That's where you're looking at ads and social. That's the purpose of it.
Right.
But when you go back and you look at your thought leadership, are we really expressing a clear point of view? Is it full of buzzwords? And are you, really articulating the message in the best way? And I think sometimes, whenever you're working with, whoever you're to author the post or, author the thought leadership blog, they will have a strong point of view and you want to make sure that you're able to articulate that, again, meaningfully. Just remove the buzzword. So what I did when I looked at the thought leadership, how can we say this more simply? I felt like it was overly complex. If I read it, it was really hard to comprehend what we were actually trying to say. I believe in using analogies, bringing things into real life so that you can actually apply that knowledge. So we just were more purposeful, I think, in developing our thought leadership strategy and the content around a true point of view. What is Nordic's point of view on AI, for example? And not dodging the question, not dancing around it, but actually hitting it directly. This is our point of view, being more clear and concise.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I mean, it's going to take a while to see the outcome of that because you've got to build a sort of a library of content where people go, I get it. I get it collectively. So that makes perfect sense. Okay, last question for you.
Sure.
What single bit of advice would you give somebody in your shoes who's about to undertake this journey? I'm going to be the one that owns this brand change.
I would say take a step back and go in slowly. I think too often we go in thinking we understand what the problem is and we start trying to solve a problem that isn't actually the problem that you have. So start with that study. It's hard. It's hard to wait those few months to get the results back. But what I've found is that having that data really helps you present to the ELT. So we were talking about that a second ago. It's hard to argue with hard data. When you put that, when I went into the ELT meeting and I put up our brand study, they absolutely leaned in. They understood, okay, she's done the hard work. It gives you the proof to back up all the other decisions that you're about to make.
Yeah. It's what 300 people say across all our markets. It's objective feedback.
Correct.
This is the fact base. Yeah.
That's what I would say. Go slow. Do it right.
Okay. So a lot to take away from these two conversations. Here are 5 things that I think are worth carrying with you. 1, Brand is infrastructure, not decoration. Arushi framed it as the spine of the organization, and I think that's exactly right. In B2B health tech, brand is what creates recall, reduces the cost of every marketing dollar you spend downstream, and keeps customers from walking out the door when a cheaper competitor shows up. 2, start with a brand study and make it third party. Rebecca was clear on this. Before she changed a single word of Nordic's messaging, she commissioned independent research across 300 healthcare executives in multiple markets. The data, which is awareness, familiarity, and favorability, gave her the proof she needed to get executive buy-in and make sure she was solving the actual problem, not the one she presumed was there. 3, perception, visibility, influence, and in that order. Rebecca's framework is one that I hadn't heard before, and I think it's genuinely useful. You can build influence without visibility, and visibility without the right perception is just noise. Fix perception first. 4, messaging is more important than visuals. Both guests pointed here in their own way. Rebecca's team didn't start with a logo refresh. They went to Chicago for 3 days and did the hard, uncomfortable work of finding a shared voice and tone. No AI, no shortcuts. The insight that content is stronger when it comes from a collective thinking rather than siloed ownership is something a lot of marketing teams could really use. 5, don't rebrand your way out of a favorability problem. This was Rebecca's sharpest point. If people know your brand and they don't like it, slapping a new name on it just means you tarnish that name. The hard work is organizational, fixing what's actually broken before the brand can follow. So that's it for today. As always, if you found this useful, please share it with someone who's wrestling with their brand right now, because I think there's a lot of people in this industry who need this conversation. I'm Adam Trinas, and I'll see you on the Health Tech Marketing Show. Thank you for listening.